And tonight, residents in Arkansas are scared for their lives as an inmate known as the Devil in the Ozarks remains on the loose, while residents in East Palestine, Ohio, are fighting for their lives as they still suffer from that toxic train derailment more than 2 years ago. I'm Hannah Doba, and for Elizabeth Vargas, America's News starts right now. Tonight, the Devil in the Ozarks, still on the run in rough, rugged terrain. His former boss calls him a violent, volatile man, and he's here to describe how a police chief turned to murder and rape. Plus, a NewsNation exclusive, hundreds of East Palestine residents left sick and in pain after a train derailment. They're fighting back. Among those getting sued are the CDC and the EPA. We're there on the ground. And the museum where 2 Israeli embassy staffers were gunned down, reopening to the public. This as anti-Semitism surges in America, with young people in New York saying they're too scared to look Jewish. But we begin in Arkansas, where an escaped inmate known as the Devil in the Ozarks is leading police on a massive manhunt and leaving residents on edge. This man, 56-year-old Grant Hardin, is a former police chief. He's been on the run since Sunday, when he snuck out of prison disguised as a corrections officer. Hardin was serving 80 years for combined convictions on rape and first-degree murder. He pleaded guilty to shooting a man in the head in 2017. NewsNation spoke with the sister of that victim, who warned people to lock their doors, saying Hardin is a sociopath capable of anything.
There's no telling what he can do. Like everybody said, he is a sociopath. He's just crazy. Just stay vigilant. Lock your doors. If you have guns, load them. And if you see anything, I don't care if it's somebody that you don't even know what's going on. Call.
Hardin was housed in a maximum security wing of the prison, but worked in the kitchen, and officials say they're looking into whether that played a role in his great escape. The FBI is now offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to Hardin's arrest, but finding him is proving to be very difficult. Police say the man known as the Devil in the Ozarks is still likely in the area, but if you know anything about the Ozarks, the devil is in the details. We're talking about thousands of caves in the region, not to mention thick forests, abandoned cabins, plenty of hideaways for someone who doesn't want to be found. Let's go right to NewsNation's Xavier Walton. He has been on the ground from the beginning in Calico Rock, Arkansas. Xavier, always good to see you. People are being told to lock their doors. What are you learning on the ground and on the water?
Well, Hannah, whether you are searching on the ground or in the water, authorities are saying, hey, this is extremely difficult. And let's start with, where we are, Calico Rock. And then when you think about the name behind it, rock, this place, this area, this terrain, extremely rocky, rugged terrain, making it even more difficult. Multiple agencies exhausting all resources. And that adds another layer. The river just behind us, think about it this way, too. It is only 3 miles or so from the prison the Devil of the Ozarks escaped from. We went out on the water, went out on the river, spoke to a tour guide who worked for Game and Fish for 30+ years and says this guy could be hiding in plain sight.
He could be hiding anywhere, really. In the Ozarks, along the river, it is hard to spot anything.
He could be sitting right there, and you couldn't see. Either side, he could be right there, and that's what the law enforcement is dealing with, and it's very difficult.
And out of the search and the investigation, Hannah, you mentioned this right off the top, authorities now offering $10,000 for any information leading to his capture. That just speaks to the urgency they have for more information as well. But at this point, authorities say they actually haven't found a trace of evidence belonging to this man, belonging to the Devil of the Ozarks. And that could be perhaps because this isn't your typical person. What person you're actually looking for?
One of the challenges that we have encountered from day one is knowing he is former law enforcement. So he has a little bit of that background. He has a little bit of that tactical training, maybe some knowledge that, the average inmate wouldn't have if they were out in this land. So having to try and that is a challenge, having to try and think like that and figure out, what would his steps be.
So, Hannah, even considering all of those obstacles we just laid out, authorities say they are confident that they are going to catch the devil of the Ozarks, not if, but when.
That will certainly leave a lot of neighbors relieved. Xavier Walton, thank you for that. And my first guest tonight was Hardin's boss at the Eureka Springs Police Department in Arkansas back in the 90s. Retired Police Chief Earl Hyatt says Hardin resigned because he learned Hyatt was going to fire him for excessive force and falsifying a police report. Chief, great to have you. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
You have insight that most people don't. I want to start with, what was your reaction when you learned that Hardin escaped?
Well, I was pretty surprised. You know, it wasn't somebody that had crossed my mind for a while, but when he escaped, I was shocked, and then I was thinking, well, I hope they catch him quick.
They haven't thus far, but like Xavier said, they're confident that they will. You were Hardin's boss at the Eureka Springs Police Department. You've said you were going to fire him before he wound up resigning. Did he ever threaten you over that? Were there other alarming things that you were aware of that bothered you while you were police chief?
Well, I was chief at that department for about 6 weeks before I was going to fire him. It was something I knew I was going to do when I went over there. I just had to get a paper trail. But I started there in August, and he was fired, or he resigned in October. And, you know, when I did fire him, I had 2 other officers standing in my office with me because he is so volatile. And, you know, he obviously was losing his temper. But he did comply and gave up his weapon and did leave.
But later on, he became police chief of a small town of Gateway. I've learned Gateway is only about 30 minutes from Eureka Springs. How did he even get the job? Did you share your concerns with residents there, again, being so close to your town?
Well, quite frankly, I didn't even know he was the chief in Gateway until I heard later. It's a town of like 400 people, and he was the very first police officer there that had ever been hired there, and he's the last police officer that they've had.
Oh, that's interesting. You've described Hardin as a very violent man, someone with a really bad temper, not to mention his size. He's 260 pounds, he's over 6 feet. Are you concerned he will kill again?
I don't think he would hesitate at anything. He's desperate. And, you know, what does he have to lose at this point?
Yeah, that's a good point. Xavier showed us the thousands of caves in northern Arkansas. He explained it to us, not to mention those dense forests, steep valleys, rolling hills. Is Hardin the type of guy who can easily survive in this type of terrain, Chief?
I've never known him to be a survivalist or have that kind of a skill. But, you know, with the Ozarks, there are a lot of caves. There's a lot of cover. There are a lot of cabins that are empty. They're seasonal, and so it's pretty easy to stay concealed in this part of the state.
That's what makes it so scary. You mentioned you were on the job for 6 weeks when you knew you were going to fire Hardin. Why? Why did you know immediately on the job that I have to let this guy go?
Well, before I became the chief of police, I was a sheriff's deputy investigator at the Carroll County Sheriff's Department. Eureka Springs is in Carroll County. And so I had contact with Hardin. I had seen a lot of the ways that he did things, some of the things he did at that department. So I knew when I took the job in Eureka Springs that was going to be the end result. I was going to get rid of him.
So it didn't take long. You saw his behavior firsthand. We mentioned Hardin was housed in a maximum security wing of the prison after he pleaded guilty for shooting a man in the head. He was also allowed to work in the kitchen. Do you think that's where he got the tools and disguise for an escape? Again, he dressed as a corrections officer. You see the picture there in his uniform.
Right. Well, you know, I would hate to speculate as to where he got the tools and the uniform, but I, you know, he's an intelligent person. That doesn't mean that he's a good person, but he's intelligent and he uses it the wrong way.
We heard in Xavier's piece from the Department of Corrections, who are very confident that it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when they find Hardin. Are you as confident knowing the terrain of where he might be hiding?
Oh, I firmly believe that they will catch him. I just hope that it's soon and that nobody gets hurt before he gets caught.
So many residents in the area, as you know, are being told to lock their doors. Just be very careful. Is this fear warranted?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Tell me why.
Because he is a violent person. He shot a man for no reason in the face. He raped a school teacher while she was preparing her lesson plans. He committed acts of excessive violence and excessive force when he was with the Eureka Springs Police Department. And then, as I understand it, there were incidents of excessive force and violence when he was at the Gateway Police Department.
You mentioned excessive violence. Do you mean when he was an officer? Is that when he was arresting people? Was it with prisoners,
Yes.
convicts?
Yes, it was. It was making arrests. He would use excessive force. He had that I'm the king attitude, or, I'm greater than thou, and you will do what I tell you or you'll pay the consequences.
Chief, I have to say, you are very familiar with the investigative portion of this. What happens now? What are investigators doing right now to find him? Where are we in the investigation?
Well, with anything that, with an escapee like this, they've got people who are very skilled, who are checking with all known associates of Hardin and making sure that he's not making contact with them. They're checking with his old places that he lived, areas that he lived in. And then the rest of them are searching diligently through that area, waiting for him to surface. And, eventually he's going to have to surface somewhere.
Chief, did he ever say anything disturbing to you?
To me?
Mm-hmm.
He said things that disturbed me. I cannot remember exactly what they were.
Were they violent? Were they threatening?
He was very threatening in his physical stature.
Yeah.
When I had him in my office and was going to fire him again, he resigned, but he was standing there and just couldn't control his breathing. He couldn't control himself. You could just see the body language that he wanted to retaliate, but he knew he couldn't because there were three of us in the room.
Thank goodness for that. Again, Chief, you have provided so much insight that not many people have on this man. Chief Earl Hyatt, thank you again for coming on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Of course. And coming up, we are live in East Palestine, Ohio, with an exclusive report. Years after that toxic train derailment, hundreds of residents are now suing the CDC. They say the agency told local health officials not to test them for toxins in their body, and now they want justice after so many of them got sick. And later, a whistleblower told NewsNation that a secret government loan program is hurting some farmers and helping others. I'll ask one congressman what he's seeing play out in his state of Missouri. It's an important story, and we're going to tell you about it. That's next. Now to a NewsNation exclusive in East Palestine, Ohio, where hundreds of residents are lashing back against authorities tonight, more than 2 years after a train derailment led to a toxic chemical release and burn. Those residents, many of whom now suffer from chronic pain and respiratory issues, say they've been lied to by the CDC. They claim they were denied health coverage they deserve after being exposed to the toxic chemical plume. They are taking their complaints to court, again, suing the CDC, along with Norfolk Southern Railroad and state and county agencies. Rich McHugh, NewsNation's investigative correspondent, has been on the story from the very beginning. Hi, Rich, joining us live from East Palestine. Rich, what are the residents asking for? Hello.
Well, ultimately, they want the truth, Hannah. They want receipts, and they're demanding accountability. Many of these residents opted out of that class action settlement with Norfolk Southern, and now they're filing a new suit against Norfolk Southern and dozens of other businesses and entities involved in the investigation and the cleanup of the derailment. They're also going after the federal agencies, the EPA and the CDC. Take a look.
We've been lied to from the beginning. The class action did nothing that mattered for any of us.
Just tell us the truth. We're all adults. We can handle the truth. What were we exposed to?
2 years after the toxic plume devastated East Palestine, Tara Hicks, Krista Graves, and Lonnie Miller say they and their families still suffer from debilitating migraines, chronic pain, respiratory issues, and blurred vision. They are among the 793 residents who filed a new suit against Norfolk Southern and over 50 defendants involved in the investigation and cleanup, including state and county agencies. It alleges a conspiracy to deny health care on behalf of Vanguard, BlackRock, Mercy Health, and Quest.
My mom went to the clinic in East Palestine, and when she asked, they would giggle at her and say, "That's your age."
You're crazy.
Yeah, her non-contagious pneumonia that she developed within a couple of weeks of coming back to East Palestine, that couldn't have been related.
The suit cites the CDC for failure to ensure proper public health response, testing, and medical support for the affected residents of East Palestine. And it says the CDC negligently instructed health professionals and testing facilities not to test for dioxins and other toxic chemicals, denying residents accurate diagnosis and critical medical care.
We were being told that there was a letter that was sent out telling our healthcare officials to disregard our concerns.
Do not diagnose anything as related to chemicals. Don't do any testing related to chemicals. This is all a stress reaction.
NewsNation obtained that CDC letter sent to hospitals and local health providers after the derailment in Burns, stating no testing or treatment related to a specific chemical exposure is recommended.
Not only does it say don't test, it says don't treat.
Mindy Bish is one of the attorneys representing these residents.
It even goes on to say that residents can feel stressed as a result of a major environmental disaster. So when I read it, I thought that is the beginning of telling these people that they're just crazy. Nothing's really wrong with you. You're just crazy.
You hear something like that now, what goes through your mind?
They betrayed the entire community. Everybody believed there was no need to get tested because of the way they announced it to people.
The CDC had their own workers here, and they got sick, and they left. They didn't tell anyone in our village that they were getting sick. They just left us.
Their goal, truth and accountability for all responsible, finally.
I want accountability. I want justice for my family.
Justice has always been found with a jury, and only with a jury.
It's criminal.
And yeah, and that's not said enough.
It's criminal negligence. It's criminal negligence.
And psychological warfare.
They've said everything is fine when we know that that's not the case.
Now, we reached out to Norfolk Southern and the CDC, have yet to hear back. These residents, meantime, vow to take this fight all the way to the end. Hannah?
Rich, this is heartbreaking for so many reasons. They just want the truth. They want transparency to begin with. Rich McHugh, I'm so glad you stayed on top of the story for the last 2 years. Really phenomenal job. Thank you.
Thank you.
And stay tuned for part 2 of Rich McHugh's reporting. That's tomorrow. As new lawsuits are filed, who's really to blame here? How will the residents get justice? That's tomorrow, right here on Elizabeth Vargas Reports. For more, we are joined by Scott Smith, independent testing expert and founder of the nonprofit Blue Shirt Justice League. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hannah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
You've done independent testing of your own in East Palestine, of the soil, the water, the crops. What did you find?
27 trips, 31 rounds of testing, and I found a mixture of chemicals unprecedented, from dioxins to polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons to persistent chemicals that do not go away, that build up in your body.
So you think these residents' complaints are valid now that you're learning exactly what's in the soil, what's in the water, what's in the plants?
Yes, and it's pretty simple. I say you can't find what you don't look for, and they were not testing for any of these chemicals. And now we have the CDC in on it with the EPA. You can't find what you don't look for. Totally unacceptable. My heart totally goes out to the residents. It is, and to gaslight these residents in East Palestine is just unacceptable. And it's not just East Palestine, Hannah. It's over and over again for the last 29 years, over 75 different disasters I've been involved in trying to test. So this is why every community needs to care, because it could be your community next where they blame the victims, you know, and there's been recent events in Conyers, Georgia and Moss Landing. So that's why I'm saying everyone needs to pay attention here, because it's unacceptable and it has to stop with these captured agencies.
I'm glad you said that. This isn't isolated to East Palestine. This could happen anywhere. Do you think the CDC and these other agencies deliberately didn't test the soil and the other things around the town?
Yes, you can't find what you don't look for. And you can call it corporate capture, undue influence. The billion-dollar companies, they get their narrative. They knew what the narrative was going to be. And for me, it's reprehensible and it's unacceptable and for them to blame the victims and say it's in their head when we know it wasn't in their heads.
Yeah, Rich McEwen, one of his pieces, he was showing us the water, and you can just see how filthy it is, polluted it is. You have had your own concerns, Scott, about the EPA testing in East Palestine specifically. What more do you think they need to do?
I think the EPA needs, the EPA is essentially useless. There's no other way to say it because they're a captured agency. I'm also a whistleblower client of the Government Accountability Project against the EPA. And I've got a sworn declaration on the Government Accountability Project website, 629 pages of exhibits to back up everything I say on how they were manipulating data under the guise of independent testing. There was nothing independent about what the EPA was doing.
Scott, how do they get away with this?
It's called corporate capture, and it's called public relations. That's why you think that public relations people are in charge of everything. For one quick example, scientist Brian Gullett, dioxin expert at the EPA. There's FOIA requests with him talking about testing for dioxins. He's never been allowed to talk to the public. Always, they get their narrative from the billion-dollar company, and they proceed accordingly.
Do you think this lawsuit will get the results that the residents are asking for, hit them where it hurts, their pockets?
I really hope so, because, making 27 trips there, none of the residents that I encountered that I tested for were making up anything. And to gaslight them in a federal government agencies, the CDC and the EPA, to say, you are the problem, it's in your head, it's PTSD. It's unconscionable. It really is. So my heart goes out to these residents, and I hope they can get truth and justice with this litigation.
I was telling Rich that all they want is the truth. What are they breathing in? What do you think the residents deserve after being exposed to this toxic burn for 2 years now?
Well, I think, they can't get their health back. It's going to take the odds are against them because it's gone on so long. And I want to also say, Hannah, it was not acute exposure. It was chronic exposure. It was ongoing exposure with the remediation and with the cleanup. And for those listeners and for you to know, you hear shelter in place. That's just not true. It's called forced exposure in place. So they should have permanently been evacuated, or at least been given the option. And instead, it was forced exposure over time, courtesy of the very own government that's supposed to protect its citizens.
Scott, as you well know, Vice President J.P. Vance and the EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, they went to East Palestine in February. We were on the ground, Rich McHugh was. Vance vowed to hold Norfolk Southern accountable for pushed for improved rail safety. Have they made good on this promise?
No, they haven't, but I'm always optimistic. Give people a chance and sit down with them. I would love to sit down with Administrator Zeldin. I don't think he knows 5% of the EPA manipulation and deception that went on, and I would love to directly inform him.
Well, hopefully these residents get the justice they deserve, and thank you for coming on and explaining to us exactly how dire the situation is. Scott Smith, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, reaction to another story we broke right here on NewsNation. A whistleblower from the USDA alleged that a Biden administration loan relief program discriminated against white farmers. I'll speak live to a Missouri congressman on the House Agriculture Committee about this very thing. That's next. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs were intended to level the playing field for workers and students perceived to be at a disadvantage. But is it really equitable if programs are helping certain races to the detriment of others? On Tuesday, we exclusively reported on a hidden DEI program in the COVID Relief American Rescue Plan signed by former President Biden. He signed it in 2021. That law established loan forgiveness for farmers that are, quote, socially disadvantaged. Well, a Department of Agriculture whistleblower told our very own Brian Enton they were directed to approve loans for all farmers who are not white. Take a listen.
It was to pay off anyone who wasn't a white male's loan. That was the only qualification for this loan forgiveness.
And what was the reaction?
So it was really silent. They were trying to keep this hushed because of the obvious implications of race-based loan forgiveness.
The whistleblower also said the Department of Agriculture even mailed information about loans to only minority farmers. To make matters worse, he told us the bureaucrats running the department in 2021, they've avoided Elon Musk's chainsaw. They're still working there. NewsNation has also discovered there are more DEI provisions for farmers under the current Trump administration. One disaster relief program has a service fee waiver and a premium reduction for so-called socially disadvantaged farmers. And those non-white farmers and farms receive far higher emergency assistance payments to cover losses than white farmers. Joining us now for reaction is Missouri Congressman Mark Alfred, who sits on the House Agricultural Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you to NewsNation for great reporting, bringing this to the attention of Congress. This is not the first help that black farmers have gotten from Congress over the years. I put together a quick list if you want to run through it real quick. In
Very quickly, go ahead, sir. Yes, please.
2002, a farm bill created technical assistance programs for black farmers. 2008, more assistance. 2018, expanding credit for black farmers. 2021, the American Rescue Plan provided us $4 billion in debt relief. 2022, the Inflation Reduction Act provided the $2.2 billion to those who felt disadvantaged. It goes on and on. This DEI program, withholding information where all farmers who are damaged by Biden's poor economy that's putting a lot of farmers out of business, is not right. We need equal weights and measures.
Are you surprised by what this whistleblower is claiming?
No, I'm not. The USDA has had very severe problems in the previous administration with the previous secretary. Thank goodness we have Brooke Rollins in there straightening it out. Even the building itself, 2 million square feet. We tried to get in when I first got into Congress. They wouldn't let us in the door. 2 million square feet. It was only 6% occupied. The USDA needs to get back to the business of helping farmers. Brooke Rollins is doing that. Our farmers are going out of business. Hannah, we are losing 1,000 farms a month in America, and our food security is national security.
Yeah, we've had a lot of farmers on this network, black farmers also, who have been doing this for generations, who are really worried they're going to lose their farm. We know white farmers sued. A federal court ruled the policy illegal. Do you agree there, Congressman?
Oh, it's highly illegal. This is reverse discrimination. I think the courts will see that. The high input costs, the overregulation from the EPA and the high input costs from Joe Biden's war on fossil fuels has really put many farmers out of business. And at a time when all farmers, no matter the color of their skin, need help from the federal government to stay afloat, that we have food security in America and we can feed not just America, but feed the world, it is important that we get it right and the money is disseminated to those who truly need it, no matter their skin color.
Congressman, I am curious here. Are there farmers in your state, the great state of Missouri, that also weren't provided loan relief, as far as you know?
Well, I want to find that out, and that's why we are issuing a letter. Our staff is working on this now based on the investigation from NewsNation. We are sending to Brooke Rollins and the Inspector General to try to get to the bottom of this. Who are the people in the previous administration, possibly still working for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which purposely did not send this information to certain farmers based on their skin color? This is ridiculous. Farmers are hardworking people. They sacrifice their time, their families, their blood, sweat, and tears to grow corn and soybeans in my district, and we should not be withholding aid to them simply because of their skin color.
Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't matter. Farming is so hard for everyone, no matter what the color of their skin is. So there's a document that NewsNation has obtained. It shows there are other DEI provisions for farmers under the Trump administration, like the NAP program, which socially disadvantaged farmers give a 50% premium reduction and a waiver of its fee. Are you aware of these programs, sir?
No, I wasn't personally aware of these. I know that there have been programs in the last 20 years, basically, to try to provide equity. Of course, they didn't use the term equity back then. Sure. But in the past, I mean, the history of the United States, some races were disadvantaged in farming. They were disadvantaged in redlining from the real estate industry in America. That has changed with HUD policy and judicial rulings. But that has been righted in the USDA. Those programs have been righted for all farmers. And we need to make sure that while we're on an equal playing field, we are not giving preference to one race, one particular segment of our population, and let's stick to equality and not equity. Equal opportunities, but not equal outcomes.
Very well said. You sit on the House Agricultural Committee and Small Business Committee, many who represent farmers, and they're touting that big, beautiful bill as beneficial to farmers. In what way does this bill help our farmers?
Are you talking about the bill to help supplement some of their losses?
That's right. Yes, the subsidies and the supplements. Yes.
Right. Well, look, our farmers, as I've said, have faced some tremendous economic pressures, primarily from Joe Biden and his war on fossil fuels. They can't afford diesel to plant their crops this year. They can't afford the fertilizer. Fertilizer is primarily made from natural gas, and when those prices go up, farmers can't afford it. And so we've got to make sure, one thing we've got to make sure is we get a farm bill done. We've been on an extension now for more than a year. We got it passed out of the committee last go around, couldn't get it passed on the House floor. But we've got to get these programs right, because our food security, as I said before, is our national security. We've got to make sure that family farms survive in America.
Congressman, I'm out of time, but I want to ask you, how quickly can we rectify this to make sure our farmers don't lose their farms in the short term?
Well, we're working on it. I have my staff getting this letter out tomorrow. This needs to be swift. We need to have answers within 90 days is what we're going to be asking. Let's put some eyeballs on this. I'm going to personally try to contact the Secretary of Ag. Just one quick correction. I was on the Agriculture Committee last year. This term, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. We are also asking that Secretary Rollins and the Inspector General return this report to the subcommittee chair of the Agriculture Appropriations Committee. We've got to work on this. We've got to get this right for the American farmer.
Well, thank you for the clarification, and we hope you come back in 90 days. We're not going to let this story go, Congressman, as you well know. Congressman Mark Alfred, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
And coming up, anti-Semitism is getting so bad in America that some young people are scared of, quote, looking too Jewish. Actress Noah Tishby is here to tell us more about what she's discovered in her latest research. Hi, Noah. We'll see you after a quick break. And remember to download our NewsNation app for the latest news on top stories of the night. You can find it on the Apple App Store and Google Play. We'll be right back. The Washington, D.C. museum, where two Israeli embassy employees were gunned down, has reopened to the public. Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky were exiting the Capitol Jewish Museum when a man shot them from behind. The suspect then shot them again after they hit the ground, and then fired even more shots as one of them tried to crawl away. That's all according to an FBI affidavit. The young victims were just days away from getting engaged. The suspect, Elias Vargas, yelled, "Free Palestine," as the police took him into custody. The D.C. murders were the latest hate crime against Jews at a time of record anti-Semitism in America. As of late last year, more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents had occurred across the country since the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023. That's according to the ADL. Today, speakers at the museum said opening back up to the public should be seen as an act of defiance at a time of intense hatred.
Today's reopening is not simply a return to normal. It is an act of resilience. It is a declaration that we will not allow hate to silence our voices or diminish our commitment to building a better future.
Now, for many people, showing that resilience may be easier said than done. There's a new survey amongst Jewish American reveals that 78% of them listed anti-Semitism as one of the top 5 challenges facing them today. More than 80% of millennial and Gen Z respondents said they were worried about it, citing social media hostility and abandonment by progressive friends. Some said they felt isolated. They were even worried about, quote, looking too Jewish. For more on these findings, we have Noah Tishby with us. She is a New York Times bestselling author and Israel's former special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. Noah, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So the group who organized this survey was set up by Israeli President Isaac Herzog. What are people in Israel thinking when they see the fear coming out of the United States?
So Voices of the People is an initiative by Israel's President Herzog, and today we're releasing the study for the first time alongside 18 that shows that the fear is not theoretical. So 4 out of 5 Jews around the world cite anti-Semitism as their greatest concern. This is one of the largest studies ever conducted in the Jewish world. More than 10,000 people and over 80 countries, and we see that we're right to be concerned. What's happening right now across America should warn everybody, because we've been saying this for a very long time. What starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. This is a much larger problem. To answer your question about what people in Israel think about this, they're absolutely shocked. I can tell you that a lot of Jews around the world are blown away by this rise in anti-Semitism. There was a concern that, or there was an understanding that this has been settled after World War II. We thought that we've been over this, but as we see, anti-Semitism is the oldest form of hate and discrimination that's still being practiced today, and today it just shape-shifted into something new called anti-Zionism.
One of the concerns we just noted was that people in cities like here in New York worry about, quote, looking too Jewish. This is sad. That's an awful reality check for 2025. What other findings surprised you in this huge survey?
I think one of the most concerning is that younger kids feel abandoned by their friends. The Jews have always stood by various oppressed communities and minorities throughout history, whether the Black community or any other community, and feeling abandoned by the LGBTQ+ and the Women's March and BLM, feeling like we've got a cold shoulder against us is something that is very concerning. I know this because I do a lot of work around college campuses, and a lot of young kids are very, very concerned about this. And again, when you listen to what that man, that murderer, was chanting, if you've been on a college campus in America in the last year and a half, you recognize not just the words, but the cadence of what he was chanting. And you understand that he heard this on college campuses in America. This is homegrown terrorism, and this is something that should be of great concern to every single citizen, not just Jews.
Some respondents mentioned that they've lost progressive friends. They described it as abandonment. Noah, you're very vocal with this. Have you experienced that yourself?
I have. My first book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth, came out in 2021. And I started speaking about these things 15, 20 years ago. And when my first book came out, I started saying that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are one and the same. I started saying that anti-Zionism is the new face of anti-Semitism. And specifically, one friend who is extraordinarily progressive basically wrote that if I keep saying that, there's no room for people like him in my life. And that was the last I've heard of him. So we have all lost friends just because we want to be proudly Jewish and because we believe Israel has the right to exist. The Jewish people, just like any other people, have the right for self-governance and self-determination in their ancestral homeland. So yes, I definitely have lost many friends throughout the years, but what can you do? This is what you get for standing for what's right.
You mentioned
it's not
earlier
about a popularity contest.
Yeah, no, we're learning that the hard way, certainly. We mentioned earlier how the Capitol Jewish Museum just reopened after those brutal killings that you and I just talked about. Jewish temples and events, people must be terrified just to attend a synagogue. Are other areas boosting security because of what we saw last week?
Absolutely every Jewish organization, every synagogue, every event is boosting security. We have been having a lot of security for a very long time. Every single Jewish school that I know of, including my school, has insane security outside. Just think about that. Mosques don't need security. Churches don't need security. They shouldn't need security, but synagogues do. This is the world that we live in today. And again, anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting conspiracy theory. What starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. The Jewish community is the canary in the coal mine. And if something's starting to happen to the Jews, it's an indication that something is deeply flawed. Something is going on in our society. And I would like every single American to focus on that and know that this hatred is not just about the Jews. It never ends with the Jews.
Now, I have to ask you, do you personally feel safer here in New York City or Tel Aviv? Do you feel safe in New York?
That's a great question. I'm based in LA. I travel to New York a lot. I just got back from Europe. I refuse to remove my Star of David. I refuse to not speak Hebrew on the streets. I know that I'm being recognized. Mostly people are coming up with good things to say, but I've seen some hostile looks and had some people come up to me that are not friends, but I refuse to back down. I refuse to change my life or change who I am or stop being proud of who I am. And I understand that this is very scary for people. And a lot of people are removing their mezuzahs from their homes and not walking around with a yarmulke. But we went to Europe. Friends asked me to remove my Star of David, and I said, absolutely not. I'm keeping it on.
You were asked to remove it. Well, thank you for coming on. This is a problem. Noah Tishby, hopefully the more we talk about it, the more we get something done. Thank you again, Noah.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Coming up, much more on our NewsNation exclusive on East Palestine. Chris Cuomo joins me live. He was there on the ground himself. We'll find out what he thinks 2 years later. That's straight ahead. Earlier tonight, Rich McHugh joined us live from East Palestine, Ohio, with a NewsNation exclusive. Residents there fighting back against authorities more than 2 years after a train derailment led to a toxic chemical release and burn. Chris Cuomo was one of the very first, maybe the first, to cover this story when it broke. He even went to East Palestine. He anchored a town hall, and he'll have a lot more on this story tonight. Hi, Chris.
How you doing, my friend? East Palestine is a metaphor, right? It's not just a reality for the families on the ground there. It's about what we choose to care about and what not. And East Palestine was a casualty of what? Political advantage. Yeah. And that's why, you know, NewsNation exists, is to not just be part of the pack, but to show what the pack is missing.
And I know they were so grateful for you and Rich McHugh to bring the attention to it. Looking forward to your show, my friend. Chris Cuomo, take it away.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.